Hi, seniors, and anyone else that might be watching. We are here today to talk about what it's going to look like to apply to college, and in particular, today, what the components of a college application are. And you should have a handout, either a physical one or like online, that you can look at, which is what you can see on the screen now. Um, and I'm just going to go over this with you and add a few things to be aware of. Typically, this is also a time that you can ask questions, so you can email those in or get them to us one way or another, and we can get them answered for you. So hopefully at this point, you already have a list of schools that you intend to apply to. I recommend something like 5 to 10 for most people. You want to have at least one that is like um, where you're kind of a shoe-in, where it's like, if you didn't get admitted to this school, that would be a real shock. Um, TSC would certainly be that. Every one of you would get in there. It could be something like UNF, maybe UCF, definitely not FSU. That is not a guarantee for basically anyone these days. It used to be when your parents went to school, it is not anymore. And then you might have some reach school. So you want to have some like, I can definitely get in there. So if everything else doesn't work out, I still have somewhere to go to college. And that can be TSC. That process, you don't even have to start until the spring. So that can always be a backup. But if you want to have a four-year school that's a backup, that'd be good to have on your list now. And then the more of the schools that are on your list that are like highly competitive to get into, then the more schools you want to apply to, if that makes sense. So it's like, if you want to kind of get acceptances from like 3 or 4 schools, then you increase your chances if you apply to more schools. Like if you're applying to Georgia Tech, for example, or Harvard, it's like very low chance of getting in. Georgia Tech for out of state students is just really, really hard. Like all the out-of-state applicants are valedictorians. That's just not even close to a guarantee these days. National Merit Scholar, not a guarantee. Same thing, obviously, for Harvard. So it's like if you're going to apply to several of those schools, like you're probably not going to get into them. So you want to up your chances of having several schools that where you're accepted by applying to more schools. I would typically caution you against applying to more than 15 just because that's a lot of application fees. That's a lot of supplementary essays, which we'll talk about. Um, and we can help narrow the list down if you're struggling with that. Um, the other reason that you might apply to more schools is if you are hoping to get a lot of scholarships, like scholarships from the schools themselves, like merit scholarships. Those are like highly competitive. So it might be that you're going to apply to 15 schools, see where you get scholarships, and then actually think more carefully about where you might attend. But for most students, around 5 to 7 is kind of a sweet spot. Okay, so as you can see on our screen, the application, of course, is going to be a big component there. Most schools will use Common App, which you might have heard about already. Some of them don't accept it. Some of them have their own applications, but most schools nowadays do accept Common App. And if they do, go ahead and use that. If you don't know this already, Common App enables you to submit your personal information once, and then it will distribute it to all the schools. So it saves you a little bit of work, and it also centralizes that application process, also makes it easier for the guidance office. So we appreciate it as well. The next thing I want to point out is that you should be planning to apply at the earliest possible deadline to increase your chances of acceptance. So you might have seen on, like FSU's website that they list several dates, like rounds are for applications, the different types of applications. It's really fun because the schools like to use different names for things and it can get confusing. but I'm here to help clarify that. So um, the types of different names that you can encounter, I'm just going to write them in here so you can like visually see them, but then I'll, delete this. You can write notes on yours if you're taking notes. So there's early decision, which is binding. What that means is basically none of you should do this unless you were like, I would sell my right foot to go to this school and I know my parents can pay for it, basically. What it means is you apply early, and if they let you in, you have committed to go. And it's like ethically problematic if you change your mind without having some dramatic change in life circumstances to account for it. Then there's early action, and this is becoming a lot more common. A lot of schools offer this. It just means I'm ready to apply earlier and I will get my result earlier. And so this is what I do recommend because it can slightly increase your chances of getting in and you find out before Christmas, which is so nice. Like all the complications are over nice and early. It's like a Christmas present. You don't have to worry about it. And you can start thinking about which of the schools that accepted you you're going to attend, or at least you know that you've got a couple acceptances under your belt, or that you need to like look for other options. So early action is what I would recommend. It's also like a similar thing is called priority or financial aid deadline. That's like the same thing, just by a different name. Priority deadline just means early. And financial aid deadline, similar, but the difference there is if you don't apply by that deadline, then your chances for getting financial aid either disappear or dramatically go down. So it's like if you want to get money from this school, apply by this deadline. Because for a lot of schools, they start giving out the money. Once it's gone, it's gone. Doesn't matter how great of an applicant you are. And then, of course, there's the regular deadline. Um, they might have different fun names for that, but it's whatever that last deadline is. I like to call that the slacker deadline. And then you'll also see rolling. And rolling just means that they will continue to accept applicants until like the day before classes start. I mean, it's probably an exaggeration, but the point is they don't have any deadlines. They just want people to apply. And then they like constantly are evaluating them and letting you know on a rolling basis. If you see that, it's nice because it gives you lots of flexibility, but I definitely recommend still the earlier the better. Whatever your earliest deadline is, try to get them all done by that time because it's the bulk of the information is going to be the same. You might as well submit them all. Now, probably a number of you are applying to FSU. I didn't double check this, but last year their deadline was October 15th for priority. Yeah, Mrs. Hollister confirms.
Well, that's the early action deadline. I don't know if that's the deadline for priority, actually.
Yeah, well, they probably just have one name for it. I never know.
Okay.
Can't remember which one they use, So yeah, that's the deadline, and then they probably have another one that's like December or January something. I don't even look at those because now you should be doing that, right? Now, if you do, yes, that's okay. You can still apply, you can still get in. But you do have slightly better chances if you can get it done by October 15th. One other little extra piece of information I'll just mention right now regarding FSU in particular is if you are really, really wanting to go there and you can tell by your test scores and GPA compared to what is typical for accepted students at FSU, that like that's not a guarantee, that like it might be a reach, and you really want to get in. Another way that you can increase your chances is by you selecting that you're interested in summer like starting over the summer after your senior year. So rather than waiting till the fall, you would take some classes in the summer. In the big scheme of things, like that could be good. You get started sooner, you get finished sooner. Some students really don't want to do that. But when you agree to do that, it does increase your chances of getting in. You can find that data online that like the average SAT scores and average GPA for summer start admitted students is slightly lower. I think UF is like November 1st, or it was last year. So again, what I counsel students to do is try to get everything done by these first deadlines, basically in the month of October, which is obviously coming up soon. And, if you can't, then at least you'll be close. And that gives you the best chance, and then you get it over with. And you find out nice and early. Okay. I was going to say, this is what I normally say, any questions so far, but if you have any questions, Mrs. Hollister, of course, feel free to ask. Okay, so for the application, whether it's the Common App or if you're applying to a school that doesn't take the Common App, read the instructions, fill it out carefully. This is an attention to detail moment. Proofread. Simple mistakes can mean the difference between getting in and not getting in. So do what you can, like get a second set of eyes to look things over. And in general, providing more information is better than not enough information. So if they give you 50 characters, don't write one word. If they give you 200 words, write at least 100, something like that. Next. Oh, actually, a couple more things about Common App. If you haven't already invited Mrs. Hollister, guidance counselor, to your Common App account as your counselor, you should do so. You go to recommenders and then FERPA section. In the way I found to do this was you click on a school that you're applying to. So first of all, create a Common App account, add the colleges, or at least some of the colleges that you want to apply to, click on one of the colleges, go to the recommenders and FERPA section of that school in your My Colleges tab, and then you can invite Mrs. Hollister to be your counselor, and that's how she'll fill out your school report, which is required for every school, and also add your letter of recommendation if the school requires that, which I'm getting ahead of myself, but most schools do require a letter of recommendation from the counselor. There's a few that don't. FSU is one, unless they've changed that in the last couple months. But most schools will. And then once you've done that, I would also recommend that you sort of click around within each school, see what's required, and go ahead and fill out the basic information, address, name, family information, all that kind of stuff. And then write down any questions that come up about what to do for various things that the schools might ask you for. Private schools or more competitive schools will tend to ask you for additional stuff. Like, why do you want to go to our school and things like that? Okay, next, personal statement. This is required by most schools, but not all. It is required by FSU. And this is one of the most important parts of your application if it's required. If it's optional, I would recommend you do one because it's your chance to share anything about yourself that makes you great or unique that does not come through in your GPA and test scores. So, mostly they just get a bunch of numbers and then they compare your numbers to other people's numbers. But you're not just numbers, right? You're a person. And this is your chance to communicate that. They also want to see how well you can express yourself in writing. The main question they're wanting to answer with your essay or your personal statement is, who are you? The Common App gives several possible prompts, and different schools might like give you prompts, but the truth is that any essay that reveals your character and your personality will be accepted. It will meet at least one of the prompts. What the experts on the personal statement say is like, use the prompts as a starting point if that feels helpful, but a lot of times they're really not that helpful. Um, and I'm going to be sharing over the next few weeks other ways to get started. And that's what the majority of this like guidance time will be focused on, is this personal statement, because it's so completely different from any English essays or like basically anything else that you've ever written. And it can really make a big difference. Like, this is one of the big things where, let's say there's two applicants, let's say to FSU, okay? They get so many applicants. You know, if you're like National Merit Scholar, valedictorian, like, you know, perfect student on paper in every way, you know, maybe you're just a shoo-in. And there are some people whose test scores and GPAs are like so low that they're like, no, sorry, we're not even going to like consider you. But then there's everyone in the middle. They're like, yeah, your scores are pretty good, your GPA is pretty good, you know, but we've got all these people who basically look pretty similar on paper as far as like numbers. How are we going to decide? This is where a lot of that decision is going to be made, is who is this person? What are they going to be like on campus? What do those numbers mean? So, you know, it could really be, this could be the deciding factor between you and another similar applicant, that that other person has a personal statement that's like pretty generic or like not well written and like just nothing remarkable, and yours is like really interesting and well written and well thought out and like shows something really unique. That could really make the difference. So I always say leave plenty of time to do your essay. This is not the kind of thing you should be writing the night before, even the week before. You'll probably need to write a bunch of drafts before you get one that's just right. And I'll be available to give you a lot of help. Definitely come back next week or watch next week to get started on that. Okay. Academic record is our next thing. Transcript and or SSAR. SSAR stands for Self-Reported Student Academic Record, which is becoming a pretty common way of having you report your academic record to the colleges. FSU does this, UF does this, others as well. So what that means is, instead of just sending them your transcript, they want you to do the busy work of entering in every class and every grade and the weighting and all that stuff. So you get to spend some really fun time online entering in all these details, and then they can like process them. Like, the point in this case, this helps you not be quite so annoyed by it, is like, you know, different schools have different weightings, like different grade point average system. Like, so this is a way to standardize everything so that then they can crunch the numbers and get like a equal, you know, comparison of different students from different schools. So you'll need your transcript, and then you'll just enter in all the information. That's something you can get started on soon. You don't need an official transcript to do that, just an unofficial copy, which guidance can help you get. And then the way that works is, if you are accepted and you decide to attend, then they will request or require an official transcript from CCS to confirm everything that you entered on that SSAR. And if they find like serious errors that might look like you were not honest about it, then they have the right to rescind your acceptance. You know, I've never heard of someone that was like, I just made this tiny little error and I got, you know, kicked out. But like, let's try not to take the risk, right? This is, you're saying like, this is the truth. So make sure it is, to the very, very best of your ability. Um, let's see. Mrs. Hollister will also be giving them your unofficial transcript to date in Common App. But a lot of schools won't look at that until later because they want the SSIR. You can see on, like, I think you can find, oh, here's the other thing I'll say about the SSIR. The way it works is you enter it once, like on the SSIR site, you can find a link through FSU application, like information page and stuff. And then you get like a user code or something, like you get a number, and then you'll enter that into each school that the SSAR needs to go to. So like if you apply to UF and FSU, this part actually happens in a day or two after you submit your application. They get your application, they like add you to their server, whatever, and then they'll send you an email that says, thanks for applying. We still need your SSAR, your test scores, or whatever else it is. And then there'll be a place where you can click and enter your number that will connect your SSAR to their application system. Okay. Test scores. Still required by most schools. There are some schools that are test optional, but there's not very many of those. And really, the only reason to do that is if your test scores are like really bad compared to your GPA. Like if your transcript is really, really strong, but you're just like a terrible test taker, test optional could be a good way to go for you. But otherwise, the majority of applicants are going to be using test scores. You need to have SAT or ACT. There are a few other tests that are starting to be used. I would recommend just using these standard ones. CCS offers the ACT in the spring. So if you're a senior, you've already taken it at least once. You can keep taking it again. You'll need to check with each school about when the last test date is that will be considered by their deadline that you're applying for. So like October 15th for FSU, typically the last test date that they can accept test scores for is like in November. But they will have that on their website somewhere. You do have to have a test score in order to even submit applications at most schools. So that's part of why we started requiring and offering the ACT for juniors. Okay, letters of recommendation. I know that you have received these forms already and heard about this. So hopefully you've already asked some teachers, but most schools will require, like I already said, the vast majority of schools will require a letter from your guidance counselor. And I've always asked, and I would recommend that we do always ask that you go through the step of actually asking for that letter and sending in a brag sheet or like the letter of recommendation request form that you should have gotten, where you can list what you see as your strongest qualities and like what you would hope to see emphasized in the letter. It's great practice just for job applications and interviews to be able to name your own strengths. And it gives the letter writer a starting place. Teachers love that we've started doing this. Instead of staring at a blank page, they can stare at the form you gave them, and it helps them think of what they should write about you. Many schools do require a teacher letter of recommendation, or some more than one. You should ask teachers that you know well, that can comment in depth on your skills, maturity, integrity, and personality. So this is one of the things that you have a real advantage on by being at CCS, is that you have teachers, probably several who have taught you multiple years. Maybe they've known you since you were in middle school, or at least they taught you last year. Maybe they're teaching you again, or whatever it is. And even if it's just 1 year, it's a smaller class, so they probably know you a lot better than they might if you were at a public school, for example. So these letters of recommendation can be a real strength in your application. That's why I say sometimes they'll have like optional letters. If they give you the chance to include a letter, you should. unless
Mrs. Eller,
you just
I'm
finish
sorry
up.
to
I don't
interrupt
want
you.
to say anything good about you.
I wanted to let you know that time is ending. We have students going for the next class in
Oh,
here.
yes, very good to
So,
remember. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll save some of these details. We're almost done, but you can look at this piece of paper. Definitely ask for your letters. Start writing down your activities. How much time you spent on them is going to be important. And then you can ask us if you have questions about any of these other things on the list. And next time, we'll, of course, answer any questions if there are any, and then dive more into your personal statement.
Thank you so much for all that really helpful information. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.